right. All right. So on the 5 slot, we'll run the, classic fuel tank, just because we're 109 on steroids. And then the 5R, we'll run the lightning pod. 6 and 4, we could put some AGMs on there, but right now what we're going to do is we're going to skip that, and then we're going to go right to 7 and 3. And before you load anything up, I'm just going to explain to you real quick what the differences are between the Mavericks. Okay. So you have your D models, right? Your D models is a smaller warhead, and it's about 200 and something pound warhead. But the biggest difference is it has an infrared seeker. So why would you want to use a D? Well, D is really the best way to think of it is like, moving targets would be great, for example, just because of differentiating between hot and cold. There are some issues in DCS with the Ds, just because you guys all know that infrared doesn't really work all that great just because there's trees and everything else in the world, right? Once you get into, it's kind of funny because we do have the G, and which anything from G, H, and K, you usually use the same seeker technology, and that's the seeker head uses it's not infrared, but what it does, it tabulates the difference between the picture itself. So once you get into a target zone, and it can kind of tabulate saying, okay, that's a target versus just background noise. That's the really big difference. Now, sometimes with DCS, H's can work a little better, just because it's not using infrared technology. But that's something you guys kind of need to play around with and decide do. But warhead size, the D and the H's are going to be fairly much the same. It's just the technology on how it seeks out targets. The next one that's kind of consequence to think about is the K model. The K model is going to be using the same seeker head technology as the H's and the G's, but the big difference is the K's are going to have a larger warhead. And so, for example, that might be a good target or weapon if you want to smoke a building. You wouldn't really use it for tanks because the D's are just going to be just fine, or the H is going to be just fine for tanks, but more of a stationary target. That's what the K's with the larger warhead. And that's why you also can't carry 3, you can only carry 1, right? So out of beer and Skittles, also too is D's being infrared. Technically, you have a longer window, or essentially a greater distance to launch from, compared to the H's. And so if and I'm talking to just I believe it's 2 to 3 nautical mile difference. So it's not like a huge difference, but it might be enough that you're out of a threat ring and be able to launch a Maverick at something, right? So for us, why don't we go ahead and do the D's? And the reason why we're going to do the D's is because we want that infrared seeker for today. So on number 7 and number 3, let's go ahead and do 3 D's each. And then 2, 1, 9, and 8, we'll do air-to-air complement. And that's something I'll leave up to you guys on however you want to outfit that. I usually like doing 2 9Xs and 2 120s, but I know, Rixie, you like doing the 120s only, so that's preference right there.
All right. Cool.
So you said
right.
Just D's?
Yeah, do 3 Ds on both pylons, so it's a total of 6. Just gives us a little bit more to play with. Obviously,
Gotcha.
A lot of drags. Just be aware of that.
Yep.
Okay. So, once I'm loaded up, we'll kind of go to the next thing. So obviously, we want to go ahead and get our teapot rolling. So with the D's and the H's, is it necessary to have a teapot to launch them? Absolutely not. You don't. However, if you don't have one, then you're going to miss out on the pre-mode. Pre-mode, what it does is, obviously a targeting pod can look out much further than the Maverick can. So you could technically then use your targeting pod to find the target, be in pre-mode. There's 3 modes, which is pre, bore, and sight, or viz. The way to think of it is bore mode is just like a gun looking down the bore. It's a really great way to, if you're flying straight into a target and you're going, shit, I need to launch this thing. Being bore mode, you can then seek right into it and get a lock and launch and get out of there. But that's not as elegant as when you can be further away with a T-pod and select what you want to select and then pre-mode over and then get a target acquisition, obviously. Visual mode, it's more stable, so it actually will keep the camera a lot more stable than bore mode, but it's very similar to it. It's just a little bit more finicky. And you'll see the quirks on it when we're talking about, for example, when you go into Viz mode and then come over to the weapons page and go hot on it, it'll automatically lock onto that ground. Whatever you point it at, that's where it locks into. And then you'll have to use your TDCs to slew into the target area. Or bore is a little bit more less that way. It's the camera's less stable because it's always looking down the bore of the Maverick, which, like I said, all of those three have their advantages and disadvantages, and we'll kind of go over it as we're kind of flying, but I think that's kind of a decent overview. Hopefully that explains some things.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you.
So the biggest thing is, obviously, you want to make sure to write, NDPI switch or PD whatever switch, essentially your right pylon switch, is turned on, just so that your targeting pod can start heating up. Did anybody join us by chance? It sounded like somebody joined.
Yeah, looks like Holden's here. Hey, Holden.
Nice, Holden. You're muted. Perfect.
Hey, man.
Holden, why don't you go ahead and...
We're at makeup.
Copy.
Step up. All right, inventory, yep.
Okay, so here's the important part. All right, so if you look on the top, it says AG, which obviously means air to ground. We have in the next button over, which is VIS, right? So right now it's in visual mode. If you hit that again, you can go into bore mode. And if you hit it again, you can go into pre-mode, okay? So let's go ahead and keep it in pre-mode for right now. Now the next important part is, obviously, if you go on the right-hand side of your MFD, you see where it says 6 AG, 6 5Ds. It just pretty much says you have 6 Mavericks, right? And the models are the Ds. So, for example, if we had other ordnance, like if you had Mavs and Harms, you guys know you can go between those, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the next thing that's really important is that there's a power, and right now it's on off. The Mavericks take like about 3 minutes plus to warm up. So this is not something you want to do when you're, a waypoint out from the target and you got like a minute to target. You want to warm these up, substantially ahead of time, because it's going to make your life a lot easier, right? So just because, again, we're not really, usually wouldn't warm up weapons on the tarmac, but let's go ahead and hit on because I want to be able to be ready, go, set the minute we take off. Okay.
Powered on.
That's good.
So that's going to do its thing. All right. So this is usually how I run my configuration when I'm in air to ground mode with Mavericks. Is on my right hand side, I'd run my TGP. Then on my left hand side, what I like doing is change it out to be weapon, WPN. Okay. Obviously, they're not going to be ready, but the reason why I like doing that is it kind of keeps everything visual. I don't have to mess around. I don't have to look. I don't have to click buttons. I'm ready to rock and roll, right? The disadvantage is, if you're in obviously this kind of configuration, is better be listening, because your head is going to be in the cockpit. So you kind of have to be cognizant of your RWR, your altitude. Altitude is friend. Everything over 15,000 is really great for especially those, Tunguskas and the small stuff. But air-to-air threats, you still kind of have to be cognizant of, because you're not going to have the HSI, right in your face, right? So as you notice that on your left, if you have weapon on the left-hand side, it says not timed out. It just means it's still heating up. And there's going to be some basic functionality. Essentially what we're going to have is we're going to have the Mavericks be displayed on the left-hand side. Our TGP is going to be on the right-hand side. You guys kind of tracking so far?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Now here what's really important is, remember we talked about the pre-mode where our essentially we can slew our TGP, and then eventually we can do a sensor select, or I should say TDC depress or TDC down, and then it'll slew all that information over to the seeker head. So there's a thing, if you look on top of the TGP, it says AG, which is obviously air to ground mode, and there's a MAN right next to it, right? So this is kind of hit and miss. If you have that in manual, what that means, MAN is manual, it means that when you do the appropriate sensor select, or sorry, TDC, what happens is it'll send the information over to the seeker head, but it will not lock the target. That's why if you have it on auto, what it's supposed to do, doesn't happen all the time, is that when you bring that information over to the Maverick, it'll then not only slew to the target, it's supposed to lock it up. Okay. All right.
What do you recommend, manual or auto?
My experience is that neither really work all that great.
Okay.
Sometimes what I found is a lot of times is it'll slew it over to the target area, which is really helpful, but then I still have to sensor, kind of slew it in a little bit more fine tune, and then hit sensor select, or sorry, not sensor select, TDC up, because that's the lock command, right? If I go TDC down on my joystick, it kind of recenters it, right? It recenters the target, right? And so it's, let me see if I can. So it's kind of one of those things where you kind of, really end of the day, you kind of have to play with it a little bit and see what ends up working. Keep it in auto. If it automatically locks, that's great. And then you're ready to rock and roll. You know what I mean? And if not, then at least it kind of puts you into the target area because you saw it from really far out. And then you can just manually adjust a little bit and then TDC forward, get the lock, and do the launch once you're within the appropriate range.
It looks like mine are warmed up now. I can see the Mavericks video feed.
Yeah. So if you go ahead and click on it and do me a favor, change it from see where you can change it on the top there. You can put on Viz or put on bore mode for me. I think both of you guys should be warmed up.
Yep.
Okay, so when you have it in bore mode, you notice that there's this funny crosshair now on your HUD. It's kind of like a large crosshair off to the left, probably most likely.
Yep, got it.
All right, now do me a favor. Using your TDC slews, go ahead and move the seeker head around and
yeah.
see that the crosshair moves around. So that's where it's looking. Okay. All right, now do me another favor. Put it into Viz mode, because it's going to be a little different. Do you notice that there's this funny looking square now in your HUD? That's like looking right forward, right ahead, right?
Yep. That's steer point, right? Or
pretty much, yeah. So go ahead and move around the seeker head. You notice how that square moves around with it?
Yeah,
so
I got it.
That's where visual looks. So visual will hone in, on a point on the ground and stay there. Right? So if you didn't have a targeting pod, this is a really, really great way look for the target, find the target, and then sensor select forward. Not sensor select, sorry, TDC forward, which is that's what tries to do the lock command, and then you get ready to launch. Now, if you take a look at again the top where it says Viz, we're in Viz mode. Do you see that in the middle? It says VOV or FOV. Sorry.
FOV, yeah.
So if you click on that, that'll kind of change the field of view. That'll zoom in a little extra for you. So if you're really far out, you can hit that, and it'll zoom in a little bit for you. Not as much as TGP, but enough where it might give you that. Okay, I can get a lock. You know.
Team it down, recenters.
Yep.
Very cool.
So targeting managed down recenters. And now here's a ticket though. If you're in TDC, right? Or sorry, in the TGP, looking around, and you're in Viz mode on the Mav, and you switch over to the Viz mode, it'll automatically lock that seeker head into place. So just be aware if you don't see that that square, it's probably most likely because you sensor selected. It thinks like, oh, that's where you want it to be, and it'll just lock into place. So you'll just have to, you know. So then you'll have to TDC or TMUS down to kind of recenter it back until you actually get to a target area where you want it to be, if that makes sense. I know it's kind of a lot of information right now, but you kind of see kind of the basic modes, right? You have your bore, your viz, and your pre. Now with your Ks and your H models, I believe you don't have you'll have the pre, but I don't think you have the viz portion of this. There's one of those where it just doesn't do it. So who wants to lead this train? Juice, you want to go ahead, and we'll go ahead and taxi left, and there's an on ramp, and then we'll just take the active and take off, since we don't really have, it's just us. I think we're gonna be all right.
Sure, stand by.
All right, let's try this again. All right, supposedly back in.
Yeah, I just saw a notification. Three's rolling.
Two's rolling.
Colt 1-3, unable to clear for takeoff. Colt 1-2, Overlord 1-1, Bra 278 450 at 17,000 flanking. Colt 1-1, unable to clear for takeoff.
Ooh, she's heavy.
There's somebody taking off.
Heavy and draggy.
I'm like excited
Right.
for the new clouds, but I'm scared as well.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's,
2, 3, breaking off, going north. So I cannot get this thing. So I'm in bore.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how to do this. So I'm able to slew. I'm able to get this thing on target, and then I push TMUS up, but nothing happens. I get the small, or the crosshairs like go, really big, and then nothing happens. I don't know what I'm doing
Do it
wrong.
multiple times.
Okay.
No, it's fine. All that means it can't differentiate something, right? So sometimes the way to do it too, remember the field of view? Click
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
field of view so you can get it closer in, and then go ahead and you know, team us up. And don't be shy about it. Don't just do it once and go, crap, it didn't work. I mean, I'll slam that button a few times. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I'll
Alright.
move around and slam it a few times. So
2, 3.
like, don't treat it like a lady. Treat it like a
where you
whore.
at?
Well, now you're making complete sense.
It's all coming together.
You guys never heard that? An automatic is a lady and a revolver is like treated like a whore.
No.
It's old gun stuff. Yeah.
I heard something.
You always
along
have to
that
be-
line somewhere.
You have to be gentle with those, but a revolver you can do whatever the hell you want and they'll still fire.
Back in.
All right.
Two, 3. Radio check. Ricks, you still up?
2, I get you 5x5.
Oh, got you. Raj, I'm headed west. I'm gonna turn around. Are you over the Patriot sites or?
Yeah, that's an affirm. It's kind of hard to stay, I think, in close proximity while fooling around heads down in the cockpit.
Oh, I know. No, I'm just asking where you're at because I was gonna come around and try again. Figure we'll keep our distance from each other.
Staying within 5 miles, I think, of the airport. There's plenty of stuff around here.
Yeah.
Even if you just do things at the airport, it doesn't really matter what it is, as long as you get to see what it feels like, what it takes to get a lock, you know?
Yeah, I'm gonna come around, head towards the Patriot sites. I'm gonna try again.
It's interesting, the crosshairs and bore sight mode don't quite exactly line up with what you get in your MFD.
Yeah, I saw that.
Welcome to DCS.
So, after you lock on with bore sight, is there any way to get the targeting pod to slave over to the MAV?
No, so when you're in bore mode, right, then you don't have to use the targeting pod. You can just launch at that point in time. So if you have a good lock and those crosshairs together, you just launch. You just pickle.
Well, what's interesting, right, is it's not just for locking and launching, it's for getting a better visual on it, because at distance, it's very hard to tell what you're locked onto.
So So try changing the field of view and see what you can see.
Oh, sure, that's even with the field of view.
Oh, I got a lock.
Congratulations.
Okay, I get it. Alright, I got it. So what's the difference between Boar and Viz again?
So Boar and Viz, the big difference between those two is Boar is the camera is not stabilized. If you notice, it's kind of bouncing around a lot, kind of dancing as you're trying to get that lock in, right? Because it's stabilized to the Maverick. Visual, it's going to stabilize to the ground, so it's going to be much more stable, which is really helpful for you know, kind of being a little bit more you know, less hurried. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Another interesting thing I just realized is if you have it in Viz and you lock onto a target, your TGP will slew to that target.
Yeah, it's doing some funny things actually. Yeah, pre-mode is also not being very cooperative tonight. I'm not quite sure why. So pre-mode, what it is once you have it in the TDC, or sorry, in the TGP, you can do TMIS up short, and then it's supposed to bring all the information over to the Maverick, but it's not really working. So I wonder if there's some kind of bug.
I'm gonna try one more time Viz mode here.
I was trying to lock up Holden, but he's moving too fast on me. So
Remember on Viz mode, go solid, it automatically locks the camera in place. So you might end up having to do the TMIS down to just kind of keep on resetting it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Alright, so like I have a good lock right now, and I could technically launch.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I like Viz mode way better than Boar. Boar sucks.
Yeah, but both have their things. I mean, if you're desperate flying, you know, doing a quick fly-in, right? And you know there's a target down there, but you're like, I don't know quite where. Okay, you know what? I'm seeing some tracer fire. I'll throw in the Boar. I'm diving down on it and just getting that quick launch. It works just fine. It works actually better than Viz because you get that lock much faster, right?
Faster, yeah.
That's really what it's meant for. Where Viz is more you're further away, and you kind of get your point in there. You can, you know, kind of screw around a little bit, slew it much nicer, get that lock and launch. You know what I mean? You're further away.
Yeah.
And then if you look, you notice that when you got a lock, that all of a sudden that there was this funny looking like bracket, almost like a launch bracket. It shows up on the right hand side.
Yeah.
That tells you when it's safe to launch.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so I'm in. Never mind, I figured it out.
Also, the modes get sticky.
Yeah, that's the bugginess of DCS. Also, pre-mode right now is not working very well, so I'm not quite sure what the fuck's going on with that.
Yeah,
Doesn't
I
wanna-
thought they fixed it, and then it got bad again.
yeah, it didn't work for me,
Yep.
but it got me, like you said, it took me to the area, but then I had to slew.
Yeah. And then you just kind of, you know.
Colt 1-2, Overlord 1-1, Bra 298, 450.
I'm pretty sure that's why you foresight them.
Flanking.
I heard that's how you actually get it to slew right on where the targeting point is looking.
Well, I thought that in pre with the TGP and auto that it would take the seeker head directly to your target. I mean, it didn't do that. It took me. I was near it. Like if I put it in the FOV in a wide view, I could see the target, and I had to slew it to it.
Yeah, it's just not. And when you're in pre-mode, you know, if team is short, down worked. Yeah, team is short, down. It's supposed to take all the information, send it to the seeker head, slew it there, and then lock it automatically for you. That just isn't working. And it'll tell you, it'll say on the TGP handing off. You know what I mean? But it's just not working the way it's supposed to, and I'm not quite sure why that is. But
Maybe
it's
it'd
never
be
really
like
worked all
within
that great, anyways.
9
So
miles.
What was that?
To be maybe closer or something. I don't know.
Maybe it's just too far away. Because I locked onto something way out with the TGP.
294, 150, at
Yeah.
25,000, flanking.
Yeah, this foresight mode sucks.
yeah, but you know, it's good to kind of get comfortable with both, because there's times where I've used it, you know, where I've had to use it, you know, and it's worked pretty well.
Yeah.
So, how's everybody
So
doing
I'm
with
seeing
fuel?
the visual mode fine. The visual mode slaves it to the velocity vector.
Yes.
The indicator.
Only problem you have to watch out for, Holden, is that when you go soy on your weapons, it'll automatically think that that's the target area you want, and it'll make that seeker head stay there.
Okay, I'm
So-
soying it, and it's still on the
On the thing.
velocity.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's hit and miss, but it'll do that on you. So just
Alright,
be mindful
so
if it's not looking where you think it's
not
supposed to be, because you're
ground
like,
stabilized. Is it supposed to be?
it is a lot better than bore side.
It's for me
Oh.
exactly the same.
Yeah, it was for me too. So you have to team a switch up.
To lock something.
No,
Correct.
team a switch up, and it locks in place to the ground, but not on something. And then team a switch up again when you get it to something you want to lock onto. I found that too. It wasn't any different until I put team a switch up.
It's just making my crosshairs go away.
Yeah, well, that means it's trying to lock onto something. And you might have to. There's team is short and long as well. The best thing is just to really at this point is just playing with it. You know what I mean? Just getting comfortable with it. That's really what it comes down to.
Is it ground stabilized for you guys, Omin and Rex?
It is for me. Like when I did Viz mode, it was no better than bore until I hit team and a switch up, and then it worked.
DMS up isn't short and long's not doing anything.
Wow, I'm seeing all sorts of bouncing tonight. That's too bad.
Yeah, it is too bad.
How's everybody doing with fuel?
I'm at 2.7.
9.8.
Of course you are, Rix. Holden, you should be pretty good because you just took off. What about you, Juice?
Yeah.
4.9.
Juice, we're
Nice,
gonna have a
okay.
little discussion about me appropriating your call sign.
Bra 321, 450, at
You just you just sip on that gas the whole flight.
Juicing it.
All right, I think I got it.
So visual doesn't seem to be working properly.
Yeah, so here, let me get on the visual because it was working for me. Hang on. All right, so visual, yeah.
I'm gonna rock in.
If I have it soy and I slew it around, it's not stabilized to the ground at all. It's just like boar. But if I put TMUS switch up, oh, never mind. It was doing it for me earlier. Yeah, you're right.
That's DCS for you though.
Yeah, it was working.
Yeah. And that's DCS for you. It just does weird shit every once in a while, guys. So we have Mavericks, quote
That's
unquote,
working
but
for me
they
now.
ain't like Mavericks like the Hornet has or
How come the F-16
A10.
ones are so broken? Isn't it pretty much the same weapon? Just
yeah, but the problem is that DCS is spaghetti code, and so you think they could just copy and paste, right? The code from
Yeah, but they can't because the systems are
They're just
different
really
in each
into-
jet too.
yeah, there's differences there, and you know the way the one guy wrote the code for the Hornet is different than the guy who's writing it for the F-16, and you know what I mean. There's all sorts of issues. Nice. Well, hopefully this kind of helped out a little bit tonight. I don't know how much it did, but
It helped me a lot. I gotta play around with it more.
yeah, and it just really comes down to that. That's really what it takes at this point. It's just realizing, and it's good to start with the bore and viz before you go into pre, and that just gives you kind of an like getting comfortable with it, because it makes you lock up and slew, and the pre isn't all that great anyways right now, where half the time you still have to do that anyways on base. Sorry, I'm downwind. But hopefully some of the explanations kind of helped when it came to them tonight.
Figured it out. So it's again DCS crap code. If you don't have your weapon page soy, and then you do TMUS up, then it locks to the ground and it's all smooth. So if you make something else soy, and then TMUS up, there it goes, nice and butter smooth.
Welcome to DCS.
I cannot get this thing to lock on this. I guess it has to. It only locks on vehicles, huh? Oh, 10 miles.
Remember, it's yeah. So 9 nauticals to launch. You should be able to lock, within that period and within that time frame or distance. However, you also have to remember too, is that it has to be infrared, right? So if it's a building, then the Ds really don't do shit for you, right? That's where
I remember when
the Ks and stuff come in.
When these Mavericks first came out and you'd try to lock something, it would lock, rather than an actual heat signature, just like an asset that had been put on the map. So it would lock a fence or a light pole or a building that was right next to the tank or something. It made them unusable.
Yeah, because, well, what it is because the infrared in DCS is broken. And so it thinks trees are hot. It thinks streams are hot. You know what I mean? Light poles are hot because they are. They show up as hot, even though they shouldn't. And trees shouldn't show up as hot. But it doesn't know how to differentiate, and that's why it would, especially in pre-mode. I mean, it would just fucking lock random shit and do random stuff. It still isn't fixed. It still does a lot of that crap.
Well, this was really helpful, Omin. I appreciate it. Helped me out a lot, that's for sure. I didn't know the first thing.
Oh, good. Yeah, they're getting there. You know, it's just it's little disappointing, but we have them, right?
Yep.
Time to time, it gets tempting to jump into a different airframe just for completeness. Like the 18's
Yeah.
so much farther along.
Yeah, it does.
I feel like the 16's
the-
ignored by development.
Well, the problem is
Yeah.
that the problem is that the people that work on the F-18 are supposed to work on the F-16, but
Yeah.
they're rushing to complete the 18, so everything is
Right.
going into the 18, and they're just the F-16 is just getting some piecemeal stuff. I believe it's just like one guy that's working on it.
Yeah.
Literally, it's like
Right.
one guy, and it's just that's not enough.
That's what it feels like. Poor guy.
Yeah, and they're like, well, where the fuck are the Mavs? He's like, what the fuck? I can only do so much, and
Right.
and so they give them to us, right? Because that's classic DCS, which is like, well, here it is. But then they're like, oh, you want it to work? Well, shit, you gotta wait longer for that.
Uh-huh.
You have to be
You know?
more explicit. Yeah.
Yeah. You just said you wanted Mavs, you got them. Doesn't mean they're working, So I mean,
Heatblur is
really,
the opposite, right, of that. So they're Heatblur, like they produce products. They got a fantastic reputation for what being complete and bug free, or as close as you can be, I guess, in this
Yeah.
genre.
well, I mean, that's like Miltech, who's making the Eurofighter. I mean, that's what they said. They're like, hey, we're not gonna bring out an airframe that's halfway done. You're gonna have to wait, and I think that's kind of cool, right?
But
Because I'd rather get something that's
Yeah.
more feature complete rather than being able to say I'm sitting in the cockpit. I mean, startups is fun for the first few times, but after that it's still part of the process, but that's not the whole joy of flying the aircraft. Just to start it, I want to be able to fly it and do things with it.
right. So excited about the news in the A6. That's gonna be frigging awesome.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool for Vietnam stuff.
A6s and A7s. We need an F4
Yeah, I
in
wish-
Vietnam.
So you need a Phantom. That'd be some cool wild weasel.
I heard they were working
All
on
right,
it, but they
gentlemen.
just shelved it.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
that's-
Appreciate it.
Yeah, hopefully
I'll go for the second one.
the winner's blue, but apparently. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it and it kind of worked out. I know it wasn't like we're
Yeah.
blowing stuff up, but at least we got to go through.
Thank you. No, this is great.
Hopefully.
Man. The other night,
Yeah.
Thunder was working with Rix and I, and he was asking us to do Mavs, and I was like, I don't know what I'm have to have Omin teach us.
Oh man, I'll tell you. Well, I was locking on okay, but it was like 50% of the time it just went into left field. It was like, where the hell's this thing going? It didn't even track to what it was locked.
Yeah, DCS thing, it's a pre thing, and that's why I'm saying concentrate on the bore and viz for right now, just because you have a little bit more success and you get that better feeling, you know what I mean? And then
Yep.
once
Yeah.
you kind of get some good launches and you're like, oh, okay, and you'll see like even a visual, you're like, man, I just launched like 3 in a fucking row at 3 different targets. That's badass, right?
Yep.
And then you escalate it from there and go, okay, time to do let's start playing with pre-mode, because you're bringing in another factor and it doesn't quite work all that well, right? And so
Request rearming.
why overcomplicate it?
Copy.
Get it off the rail the first time, get it to actually launch at a target, and then so when you do pre-mode and you're like, oh shit, okay, I still have to kind of manually bring it in and lock it up, that doesn't seem that foreign to you anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, I'm back in
And
Iron
it's-
Solace. I'm gonna go try and actually blow something up with these.
Yeah, go and try the difference. Try the fly first with the D so you can get the infrared, and then fly the H's just so you can see, okay, that is a little different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you're going to have a difference. Not having infrared seeker head and the other one does. So And that does make a difference. So, all right, gentlemen, I'm gonna call it. You guys have a good night, okay?
All right, you
Thanks,
too, man.
sir.
Thanks again. Yep.
Man. Later.
All right, catch you guys.